Hello, and welcome to the CBC Spouses Essay Forum. I'm Diane Cleaver, chair of the CBC Spouses Group and spouse of Congressman Emanuel Cleaver II, 5th Congressional District, Missouri. The Spouses Group works to promote the goals of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and we specifically work on raising funds for student scholarships. The Essay Contest and Issue Forum are annual events sponsored by the spouses. Through district offices of Congressional Black Caucus members, we reach out to area high school students, inviting them to submit an essay in response to a question posed. Winning students are recognized during the Foundation's annual legislative conference. In addition, at that time, the spouses host a forum on the essay topic. Since our legislative conference this year is a virtual one, we will recognize our student scholars and hold our issue forum virtually as well. You'll hear more about the essay forum, the essay contest and issue forum shortly. First, I want to express our sincere thanks to all the students who submitted essays. We applaud your scholarship. And thanks as always to our spouses for their continuing commitment to the next generation. We thank also the Foundation staff for their hard work to support this effort. Finally, we express our heartfelt appreciation to Microsoft, our business partner in this effort. The focus on young people, both in hearing their voices and understanding their perspective, remains a priority with the spouses. The essay contest and issue forum are part of our efforts to do so. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our essay contest and issue forum chair, Mrs. Simone Marie Meeks, spouse of Representative Gregory W. Meeks, 5th District, New York.
Thank you, Diane. It is my pleasure to be a part of this forum, and I want to first begin by thanking our panelists. They include Dr. Wakia Duncan, who is a master principal at the Cathedral School and a specialist in diversity and inclusion. Callum Matthews, who is our second place essay contest winner, as well as Fred Humphreys, who is not actually on this Zoom call, but he has been a magnificent partner to the spouses, giving all of his time and his support via Microsoft to our endeavors. In fact, through Microsoft, we've been able to contribute millions of dollars on behalf of students coming out of high school and going into college, set aside from the amount of money that we've been able to raise by them leveraging their company's name, I guess, really. Microsoft enables digital transformation for an era of intelligent cloud and intelligent edge. Its mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Certainly, where the CBC spouses are concerned, Microsoft has done just that. Now, I would like us to take a moment to hear a spoken word piece from Phonetic Wisdom, also known as Sabrina Parker. Sabrina was born and raised in Far Rockaway. She's a poet, spoken word artist, curator, host and founder of Voices of Black Power, which exists to preserve healing spaces for her stories to be artistically achieved and authentically to break down stigmas. It is my pleasure now to introduce Phonetic Wisdom.
Thank you, Ms. Meeks. This piece is called Electives. You want to talk about elections, and I see no need, because how can you compartmentalize mass injustices into sections? Do a 2-minute clip about centuries of oppression, making claims about what you will do, but it never gets done. Clearly, there's no direction or standards for who the country lets run. Honestly, I miss when the Black Panthers would walk with guns. We stood united and did not play dumb about the significance of politics. We acknowledged collective power and were damn proud of it. It seems that justice is a battle that never gets won, with a system built for the franchised to disenfranchise. Yet how can you make a difference sitting in front of the TV always pointing out a racist when you yourself have never done anything to see your race get ahead? Personally, I foresaw the election of Mr. 45. So no, I did not feel a sense of oppression, emotional pain, or stressing. The outcome did not surprise me, undermine, or define me in America KKK. You can be the victor, but only if you choose to. I support my people organizing politically with recognition of our financial needs because money is political power. Seeing how lobbyists lead and the government follows, corporations determine tomorrow. Funding the media and the government is like watering the same seed. They are all caught up in greedy schemes. Learn to withhold your dollars from the powers that be. These are the wicked powers that you complain about and still feed when you neglect to stop being the driving force of a destructive economy. Economic slavery is the slavery that keeps you in the plantation field and master's house, but the field and house look different. Oh, Trump is going to build a wall and deport them all is what you're telling me. So who's going to run the Trump towers? Don't be a fool. It's you, the majority, who gives him power. It is the 11th hour and they're playing games with us. I just want a candidate with the balls or breasts to outsmart the rest, whether it be a white woman, black man, or a Jewish Mexican. My question is for who and what do your intentions emit? Because the Obama presidency has not miraculously resolved all of our issues. Black mothers still mourn their son's blood. Mass incarceration still plagues us as miseducation and ADHD diagnosis continually chase us. So what does this illusion of choice really endorse? Perhaps the silencing of voices or the ignorance of noisy protests against police brutality, unemployment fallacies, or sexually neglected tragedies. So if you want to talk about elections, tell me, what does the vote mean to you?
So tell me, what does the vote mean to you?
Yeah, so voting is really important, as I stated in my poem at one point, that the Black Panthers, as well as activists for Black people like Stokely Carmichael and Marcus Garvey, they understood the vitality of politics to the race of a people as being a passage to equal treatment in education, economics, healthcare, and, so forth. Stokely Carmichael actually said, Black power means the coming together of Black people to elect representatives and to force those representatives to speak to their needs. And recognizing that the power is really from the ground up and not the top down, we need to focus on local offices, like how I had this opportunity to share this piece because I used my voice at a rally in my neighborhood in which you saw me and, you gave me an opportunity to be here and to share this piece because little voices are being heard and they do have impact. But it's about us coming together, within our communities on a micro level to get to the changes we want to see on a macro level by voting in the right people in our immediate communities and holding them accountable to do what needs to be done. Especially now when we've already been in such political muck with the way our government's been being run, and now people are in fear for their health. But the people in power don't endorse methods or institutions that really stand for health. And then people are in fear for their financial future. And then we have a government that, they don't truly show concern beyond superficialities that there are at least, 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. What are we really doing about that? And so for me, this is what we can address when we vote for people within our communities.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Sabrina. Dr. Duncan, perhaps you can address some of that in your providing us some context because Ms. Parker correctly speaks of some of what the Black Panthers were about. However, those who are not around don't seem to know that we were not of one accord even when the Panthers walked the streets. So give us some context.
Right. As I begin to share just a few slides, I will say that when we speak about the Black Panthers, often we start with what made them most popular. And a lot of that does have to do with embracing the idea that the Second Amendment is something that should be utilized by all people, and especially Black people, because of what the country has done to us over the course of 4 centuries. What they are less reminded for is the fact that they started breakfast programs in schools, and that was something where there were quite a few people that could rally around that. However, the ways in which they were extremely vocal about what they knew about the Constitution and what was going on in certain states was what the divisions, or how we saw some of the divisions. It's the same thing that we saw when we now speak about the love that many people have for Martin Luther King Jr. and the love that people have for a lot of other activists. That same love wasn't fully felt at that time. And so that might be what Mrs. Meeks is speaking about.
99 problems. Don't let your voice be one. Continue, Dr. Duncan. Let's go with your slides.
Wonderful. Okay, so my slides somewhat have an agenda. First, like, what's a millennial in the first place? What was the voter demographic breakdown in 2016? What have we seen in the last 4 years? And this is not focused on a particular individual, just what has been happening, and what's at stake in 2020. So what is a millennial? If we're looking at the timeline, I am considered a Generation Xer because of the year that I was born. My parents are baby boomers because of when they were born. So millennials are anywhere between born between the years 1980 and 1995. I do understand that compartmentalizing people has a lot to do with trends that we see in both technology, economics, and sometimes education, but that's how millennials are often defined. First, the 15 years between 1980 and 1995, but then there were certain surveys that were done. And this slide shows you where executive presence is concerned, revenue, adaptability, collaboration, tech savviness, and various other ways in which one can organize baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials. We see that, unfortunately, what millennials are known for most, though there's so much more that they should be known for, is their tech savviness. We'll go more into what I've seen of millennials, not only because I've taught them, but I also cavort with them pretty often to make sure that I can be really present in understanding what the needs of younger people are.
You neglected to speak of Gen Z.
So Gen Z is a question mark because some of them overlap with some of the millennials, and then some are way later than that. So in my household, of my 4 children, I have all Gen Zers because they were all born after 1995. They haven't necessarily cut off yet when that will be, but Gen Zers are not that different in understanding the tech savviness, mainly because they are the first generation where there wasn't ever not any technology available. Like, they're the first ones where there's always been Google, there's always been cell phones that were available. And that's very different from all of the other generations before them, which is why arguably they're also known to be more adaptable than all of the other generations because of how they came into the world and what was already available for them.
Arguably.
Thank you for that. Yes, arguably. So if we look at the 2016 election and how the breakdown happened first by race, we see what was reported as to how people voted. We know that none of these groups are an actual monolith, and that often when we're looking at breakdowns by race, we don't always see the relationship between race and socioeconomic status, and that's not something that's seen here, but it's definitely important that we think about that, especially if we're speaking about millennials and allegedly what their needs are and the reason why things went the way they did in 2016, or why some people surmise it did. Now, if we're looking at the choice by age, we see in 2012, what the age breakdown was, and in 2016, what the age breakdown was. If we're looking at what millennials did, 18 to 29 is the band for millennials. And in 2012, the vast majority did vote Democrat. And that doesn't mean that they voted Democrat locally. This is more of a national election poll, as it says in the bottom of the screen. If we look at 2016, still the vast majority did vote Democrat, but there's a reason why there were fewer who voted in general. We see here that Gen Xers seem to have voted more than millennials in 2016. And I want to be very careful that this is not an indictment in any way, shape, or form of how anybody voted. The reason why I don't want anyone to think about that is if you look at some of or review some of what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said in talking about voting, he said, and this is something that can apply not just to race and ethnicity, but definitely across the generations. He said that we've come to a time, and this is a broad strokes of his statement, we've come to a time where Southern Blacks don't have the ability to vote and Northern Blacks have little for which to vote. And that's something that we seem to be seeing right now and have seen over the course of the last 20 or so years, where there was a push for limiting full voter enfranchisement. And when people were able to vote, there were some issues that just didn't seem to speak to them. And as we go through more of these slides and have the discussion, we'll see that a lot of what people want to see their politicians speaking about, there seems to be a disconnect between the needs and what's popular and what's promoted as politicians are speaking. So what's at stake when we're talking about voting? And this, it doesn't matter whether this is this election cycle or any election cycle. This has literally happened, and it has been happening since the United States was the United States. When we are talking about national elections, though, I do really like that Sabrina spoke about the import of the local elections, because more often than not, your local elections is what's actually impacting your life more closely. But for some reason, we speak a whole lot about the national elections, not necessarily thinking about our school boards and other items like that. But so if we're talking about what's at stake, it is reshaping or shaping what the federal judiciary looks like. We know that Supreme Court justices are there until they decide to retire. And if they don't, they're there for life. We're thinking about things like Space Force. We know that several presidents have made sure that we had some type of presence in our outer galaxy. Tax reforms. Speaking about over-incarceration and what that looks like in Black and Brown neighborhoods, the amplifying of anti-Black and anti-Brown racism, what the climate is doing and how we're impacting it, as well as immigration and family separation. So when a lot of research has gone into this is both from the Pew Research Center, from BBC, from New York Times, literally all of the surveys that have gone to people that identify as millennials say that the main challenges that millennials are facing is unemployment. Low wages are part of that, because there are some millennials who have decided, if I'm going to be underpaid for what I went to school for, I'm choosing either to bow out of the employment force for now or start to create my own business. There are also high levels of stress and depression, and that has a lot to do with the economic state. The concerns are similarly connected to the challenges. What is climate change doing to our lives, and how is it impacting us? What jobs are available because of climate change? College debt. government accountability, again, as Sabrina spoke about, and religious conflicts and what we saw as givens in society versus what we're coming to know as the structures behind what we thought were givens. So the major issues for millennials are the economy, healthcare, Supreme Court. You can definitely read it here. And this is not something that I surmised on my own. This is from the Pew Research Center that is very reputable and conducts surveys pretty much weekly and is extremely accurate, as you will see these as major issues as you continue to survey millennials. And finally, as we're talking to millennials and finding out, one, why did the voting occur the way it did in the past and what we need to pay attention to next, this has zero to do with who's in office or who's being voted for. It has more in an understanding of the difference between popular vote and the electoral college, and how when one chooses to bow out of voting, how the electoral college is then impacted. And so when we do hear from Kellen and others, I really want us to understand that the voting public now, especially those who are both in Gen Z and millennials, are looking for not so much a guarantee that who they vote for will do everything they want. That's not possible because there are so many people within the United States, but for there to be some sort of accountability so that when we're voting and we're offering support, whether it be financial or an actual vote, that there's some system within that of a different type of checks and balances that allows them to know that our vote was not taken for granted and that our voices are not only heard, but that our voices and our lives will be positively impacted by the people for whom we vote.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. Kellen, speaking to what Dr. Duncan has given us, perhaps you can give us your comments and then continue with your remarks, and then we can have a little back and forth here.
Okay, sounds good. First, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Callum Matthews, and I'm a recent high school graduate hailing from Coward Hall College High School in Baltimore, Maryland. But I'm now a freshman at Howard University studying computer science.
And he hails from Congressman Kwesi Mfume's district, correct?
Okay. And also I'm honored to have been selected for both this panel and also as second place recipient of the Congressional Black Caucus Spouses Essay Contest. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of my future and my aspirations real fast. So upon receiving an undergraduate degree, I would like to pursue a cybersecurity or a computer software specialist job in a private sector or even in the government as a contractor. And to do this, I would like to first take advantage of internship opportunities early so that I can apply my classroom knowledge to real world problems and make meaningful connections in the computer science industry. And continuously applying myself will give me the knowledge and skills to stand out in a very, very competitive and prevalent field. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I want you to realize that you get out what you put in. I plan to give my all during my time at Howard, and in turn, what I will get out of it is beyond what I can fathom right now. This ties into really any facet of life, but particularly with voting, because if you have the mindset that voting is something that could benefit both you and your well-being, then you'll put more effort into it. And if more effort is put into it, then you receive a better end result. And then this creates a positive outlook that you have on voting, and it both encourages you to possibly share your experience and even motivate others to vote as well. So I'm going to go into my generation. So an example of a reason why someone my age wouldn't vote is lack of motivation, to be put simply. Many voters feel indifferent or removed from the political process, thinking their single vote doesn't matter. And according to the Washington Post, about 100 million US citizens didn't vote in the 2016 election. People that choose not to vote fail to realize that there are so many others like them. And this means that, yeah, maybe one vote doesn't make a huge difference, but 100 million certainly do. And if people knew that their vote mattered this much, then there wouldn't be such a drastic percentage of people skipping the polls altogether. So to prevent future voter decline, I have a few suggestions and a few points. First, a future goal to increase voter turnout is online voting. Currently, however, online voting is a bit risky and is susceptible to hacking. Pushing voting by mail, however, and also early voting across the country will increase voter participation, and it will offer more convenience and options to citizens. Increasing the accessibility and ease of voter registration is important, and also same-day registration and also online registration as well could be implemented. Another reason why people my age will not vote is lack of access to information. So my generation uses a big chunk of their time on social media, and social media can actually be a revolutionary resource to increase young voter turnout if given the knowledge and the know-how. But there's actually good news in this. Recently, Instagram has been making strides to ensure young voter turnout by publishing advertisements and promoting voter registration across their platform. And if more social media sites could do the same, widespread social media platforms, if that was more common thing, numbers of young voter turnout would definitely increase. Because educating teens 13 to 17 on civics and government will most certainly ensure knowledgeable citizens eager to exercise their rights, which means that there will be more people at the polls voting every 4 years. Increasing the number of polls and trained staff will also reduce long lines and make voting more attractive to young onlookers. Because people my age, I admit, we don't like waiting. We're used to technology, fast connection speeds, and little to no delay in what we want. And with all this said, we cannot forget also the massive stigma around Black citizens and voting. Governments should, this isn't the only point, but governments should look at giving voting rights to formerly incarcerated citizens because African Americans are disproportionately affected by the justice system. So allowing formerly incarcerated citizens to vote would increase the Black vote. In addition, African Americans are typically concentrated in urban areas with very few polling centers and longer lines, which are factors that discourage voter population. Another way that governments can attempt to increase voter turnout is they definitely need a system for like a backup system and emergency election plan, especially given the COVID-19 crisis. Voters in my generation could possibly be scared off by the COVID crisis and end up not even casting their vote altogether. States and federal guidelines need to be consistent in emergency situations such as this one. This way, governments and even social media will have a means to safeguard the election process. Thank you.
Callum, that's wonderful. I have a question for all of us here, speaking specifically, I guess, to Sabrina and Dr. Duncan, and Callum, please, you come in as well. My question is, you've made a lot of points about different parts of our population, but what about those that are less heard? I often hear lots of talk about those affected by the criminal justice system, but do millennials and Gen X, Gen Zs have any concern for the economy, climate change, or any such?
Yeah, as I was saying previously about, people's concern about their financial future, unemployment has risen. People are concerned about going back to school, how to go back to school safely, doing online classes. And we've already, been living in a state where the living wages are high, but what people are making to live is low. And
do you think your group understands that voting can impact that?
I think that my group is wary of voting because they've heard a lot of, chance for we'll make a change or we'll do this or this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And I think that government is something that we're adverse to. And so voting is something that we're also adverse to, that we're very skeptical of. I do see, though, that there are more, youth in my age group or millennials making an effort to make their voices heard, taking those opportunities and those chances to take a stance and see how they can get more involved. And I try to do my part, as I'm here now, to spread and share the information of how we can make that change and that difference. And I think that my concern is also like there needs to be more education or, access to education about government and how it works, at a minute level at the very least, so people can have a basic understanding, because when people don't understand, they lose interest. And it kind of sounds backwards that people wouldn't seek to get the understanding so that they can be interested, but it's kind of like because they feel so dejected by the government, they feel like they need the government or people in the government to make more of an effort to get to them.
Kellen, do you see that same problem in Baltimore or among your friends?
Yes, I do. I mostly see people being uninformed for the most part. Like she said, people know that voting, I guess people know that voting could benefit you from the slogans that candidates might use, like we can or et cetera. But I guess there's not enough push in school systems or at home or even online to actually go out and either register to vote or just to go to the polls and vote if you're already registered. Something that I have done, I'm trying to get more people on it. So on Instagram, I've been sharing, like I said earlier, how they've been promoting voter registration among young people. I've been promoting that as well on my Instagram stories for the past few weeks. I've been posting, they have stickers on Instagram that say vote 2020 or, messages like that. And I'll post those on Instagram. And sometimes people will comment on that and I'll, talk to them about it. So I also try to get more people onto that as well.
Dr. Duncan, do you see that as what Kellen is talking about, Instagram, what sounds like advertising to me? How do we get the folks more interested in voting?
So a couple of things I wanted to say. One, we have to have a real line of demarcation between Gen Z and millennials. And the reason for that is this. Millennials are kids, I'll still call them kids because they're younger than I am, that are between right now the ages of 25 and 40. And they grew up dealing with 9/11, dealing with the Great Recession, and then dealing with life now. And so there have been so many areas of disillusionment that they've faced. Whereas Gen Z some of them were babies when 9/11 happened. And though they were aware of the Great Recession, the way it may have impacted them personally is very different because they were not yet in the workforce. So when we're talking about the reasons why some people are voting or some people are bowing out of it. There are 25 to 40-year-olds who really saw that I put my faith in what I learned in school about civics. I understood that it was important for me to vote at the local level because it's legislators that make the laws, not whomever is president. The president signs it into action, but it's legislators who are creating the laws. If you have voted locally as well as nationally, and every single time you do it, you're only incrementally improving, or life is not changing for you at all, there comes a time where you start to wonder, either am I giving my vote away, or is there any point to it? Where Gen Z is concerned, they've actually seen change happen at a rapid pace. They understand how cancel culture can change everything. They understand that social media can one day have you on top with millions of followers, and the very next day you have one or two. So for them, I don't believe that their foray into voting is going to be met with the same obstacles or disillusionment that millennials have, because they've been able to almost form culture in the ways that meet their needs. For millennials, what I think it's going to take is this remembering that though politicians don't seem to always understand that it is for the people and by the people, there has to be a concerted effort to ensure not that you're voting down the line for whatever, whether it's Democrat, Freedom Party, Republican, that doesn't matter. There has to be an understanding that while whomever is in the White House is the person that's giving us a global image, the people who are our representatives, the people who are our senators, both the national and federal representatives and senators, but also the ones at your state, are the people that you need to be speaking to more. Those are the places where if they start to see changes locally, I believe that will start to influence how they're seeing what could possibly happen in federal elections. I do believe that those who chose not to vote, there are so many who are very highly educated, and they recognize that their individual decision to not vote could metastasize into a global, but not global in the entire world, but global where United States is concerned, decision not to vote and what that effect could be. And I believe that in doing that, the attempt was to show when we bow out, this is the potential of what could happen. And so it is up to you as a politician to make me want to vote for you. Don't have me assuming what you will stand for and what you won't stand for. Don't say one thing in debates and then do another thing consistently.
I think we also have to get to the point where we have millennials, boomers, Gen X, Gen Zs all understand that voting is not for someone else. It is for you and those persons that you care about. You're not doing any politician or person that you may not know any favors by voting for them, because just like you, they have a stake specifically at local level, state level, federal level. All those persons come back to one locality. There is a saying that says all politics is local. And that is because whether they like it or not, those persons who represent you also live your life. It may look differently, but I assure you, those persons who represent you live your life. Because take, for example, Sabrina, we met at a rally where you were spitting, but my family, the reason why it appealed to me so deeply is because my family was in Far Rockaway. My family is in Baltimore. My family is in South Carolina and Mississippi. My family is in the Caribbean. In all of those places, who represents you matters, because the type of ideas that they have are those ideas of the persons that put them there. And therefore, we have to pay more attention, not just to our local elected officials, but what is happening in other localities, because ultimately anybody who represents you has to get together with someone else who's a representative, and together they make policy. No one makes it by themselves. And so no matter how angry you get at your personal representative, you must always keep in mind how that representative is working in concert with others, because that is how policy happens. No one gets to simply write it down for themselves. And with that said, I hope that we've seen the many, many problems that exist in the world, but I hope you all understand that voting need not be a problem for you, but a jumping off point to a brighter future. Yes? Thank you all for being with us today. Kellen, I am so happy to have had you. Sabrina, you brightened this forum up a whole lot. I expect that when this airs on September 22nd at 11 a.m., many people are going to want to know about Kellen and Sabrina and Dr. Wakia Duncan. I thank my chairwoman, Diane Cleaver, and I thank all of the people who are part of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation staff who are very supportive in getting this done. And most especially, I thank Microsoft, who, surprise, surprise, Kellen, will be delivering Surface Pros to all of the essay contest winners. Those will be coming in the mail. So in addition to the money that you thought you won, you get a nice Surface Pro.
Thank you so much.
A gift. And that's all courtesy of Microsoft, because they want to invest in our young people as much as we do. And Dr. Duncan, I thank you so much for providing context and your continuing commitment to the youth. Teaching middle school is no easy task, but we're counting on you to make voting better for us because of it. Thank you all, and good night.